Everyone ignores the billionaire Arab executive's twins when they fall. Only the African waitress saves them without knowing who their father is. The grand hotel lobby buzzed with a hum of wealthy executives and important guests from around the world. The extravagant chandeliers above cast a warm, golden glow on the polished marble floors. Among the high society crowd, the Arab billionaire, Zayd al-Hakim, stood in the center, surrounded by his business associates, seemingly unfazed by the chaos unfolding around him. His identical twin children, no older than 5, had slipped unnoticed as they wandered too close to the edge of the luxurious balcony. What happened next shocked everyone. The twins, innocent and unaware, lost their balance and tumbled over the railing. The crowd froze as everyone around them looked away, unsure of what to do. But from the back of the room, a young African waitress named Amina caught a glimpse of the children falling. Without hesitation, she rushed toward them, diving into action and doing the unthinkable. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Zayd al-Hakim stood tall amidst the glittering crowd of Dubai's elite, his sharp suit tailored perfectly to his imposing frame. He was a man of power, a billionaire whose influence stretched across industries, and his presence commanded respect. Tonight, he was attending one of the most exclusive galas in the world. The ballroom of the luxury hotel was alive with laughter and chatter as champagne flowed freely and expensive food was served in ornate dishes. Yet, amidst it all, Zayd's thoughts were far from the glamorous event unfolding before him. His eyes were on his children, the twins, Layla and Zayd Jr., his pride and joy. They were playing quietly near the balcony, their innocent faces filled with curiosity as they explored the opulent venue. Zayd kept a close eye on them, his protective nature ensuring that no harm would come to his precious children. But in the whirlwind of conversations and clinking glasses, something unexpected happened. The children, in their innocent exploration, wandered too close to the edge of the balcony. Layla, always the more adventurous of the two, leaned over just a little too far, her tiny hand reaching for a decorative plant placed on the balcony's edge. It was an innocent gesture, one that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but in that split second, it caused her to lose her balance. The gasp of horror from the crowd went unnoticed by Zayd, who was too busy speaking with a business associate. By the time his head snapped in the direction of his children, it was too late. Layla, with a shocked expression on her face, had already slipped. Her twin brother, Zayd Jr., unable to comprehend what was happening, followed in an attempt to save her. In a split second, the twins were falling. The crowd around them stood frozen. No one moved, no one shouted for help. The socialite crowd, accustomed to observing from a distance, seemed paralyzed by shock. They could barely process the situation. Everyone in the room, from the powerful to the influential, simply watched. It was as if they all expected someone else to take charge. But in the midst of their inaction, one person did step forward. Amina, the young African waitress, had been serving drinks near the back of the room. She had seen everything. Without thinking twice, she dropped the tray of drinks she was holding and sprinted toward the balcony. Amina was not one to wait for others to act. Her instincts told her to save them. Her heart raced as she reached the edge of the balcony just in time to see both children plummeting toward the ground. Amina dove, her legs pumping as fast as she could, and with a strength born of desperation, she jumped forward. The sight was something no one could have predicted. Amina, in a heroic act of courage, managed to reach them before they hit the floor. She stretched her arms out and caught them in midair, pulling them into her chest as they fell to ground in a tangled heap of arms and legs. The world seemed to slow down around her. In that moment, Amina wasn't just a waitress in a luxury hotel. She was a savior. She was their lifeline. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as she carefully cradled the twins, making sure they were unharmed. Amina didn't even have a second to breathe before she heard the collective gasp of the crowd behind her. Zayd, finally breaking free from his conversation, turned to see the chaos unfolding in front of him. His heart stopped. His children were in the arms of a stranger, the woman who had caught them, the woman who had saved their lives. His eyes widened in disbelief as he took a few steps forward, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "Are they all right?" Zaid's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every emotion he had. The crowd around him was still paralyzed, but Amina's eyes met his. "They're fine, sir. They're safe," Amina said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. She carefully set the children down on the floor, her hands lingering for a moment to make sure they were truly okay. Zaid was frozen for a moment, unsure what to say. The twins were starting to stir, their wide eyes searching for their father. He rushed over to them, kneeling in front of them with protective instinct stronger than anything he'd felt in years. "Daddy!" Layla cried out, reaching for his arms. Zaid scooped her up instantly, hugging her tightly. He was shaken, his heart still pounding in his chest. Zaid Jr. clung to him as well, his small hands gripping his father's jacket. "Are we okay, Daddy?" Zaid's eyes welled with tears. He kissed both of them on their foreheads. "You're safe, my love. You're both safe." He turned to Amina, who had been standing quietly to the side, watching the scene unfold. "Thank you," Zaid said, his voice thick with emotion. Amina shook her head, a modest smile on her face. "It's nothing, sir. I just did what anyone would have done." But Zaid wasn't buying it. What she had done was nothing short of extraordinary. The world around him faded as he looked at her, realizing the depth of her courage. This woman, this waitress, had just saved the lives of his children. She had risked everything for them. Without a second thought, Zaid stood up, still holding his children close to him. He walked over to Amina, extending his hand. "You saved my children. I can never thank you enough for that. What can I do for you? Anything you need." Amina hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond to such an overwhelming offer. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight. "I just did what was right, sir. There's no need for anything in return." Zaid could sense the sincerity in her words. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that she had done something truly remarkable. "Please, let me help you. You deserve more than a simple thank you." As the crowd began to buzz with activity again, Zaid made a decision that would change everything for both of them. The night had already taken an unexpected turn, and he was determined to make sure that this moment, this act of heroism, would not go unnoticed. The gala had returned to its usual hum, but for Zaid al-Hakim, nothing felt the same. The conversation around him was distant and muted, like an echo. His children were safe, and that alone was a miracle in itself. As he continued to hold them, he looked at Amina, standing a few feet away, now surrounded by staff, their eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. But Amina, ever humble, stood apart from the attention, her gaze focused elsewhere. The warmth of the evening had dimmed for Zaid. His mind was reeling. How had she managed to leap into action so swiftly? Amina wasn't just any waitress. She was someone who possessed courage beyond her years, a rare quality in a world dominated by superficial values and power. She wasn't expecting anything in return, but Zaid knew, deep down, that this was a moment that transcended mere gratitude. As he excused himself from his associates, he made his way over to Amina. He was no stranger to wealth and influence, but tonight had shown him something entirely different. He had witnessed a selfless act of courage that demanded recognition. Zaid didn't just want to thank her for saving his children. He wanted to understand her, to understand the strength behind her actions. Amina, noticing his approach, instinctively took a step back, though not out of fear, more out of modesty. She had never expected the spotlight, and now, standing face to face with a man of Zaid's stature, she felt a tinge of discomfort. It was odd, standing here like this, especially when just moments ago she was merely a waitress in the background, serving the guests and fulfilling her duties. Now, she was face to face with the man she had just saved, and she couldn't help but feel out of place. "I know this might be strange," Zaid began, his voice calm but carrying a weight of sincerity. "But I can't let this moment go without acknowledging your bravery." His eyes, usually so calculating and precise, were filled with gratitude. "You saved my children's lives. I can't simply walk away without offering something in return." Amina felt a tightness in her chest. She didn't want anything from him. Her simple act of kindness was what anyone would have done, right? But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the depth of his gratitude, and she couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Mr. Al-Hakim," she started, her voice steady but unsure, "I don't need anything. I just did what felt right in the moment. Your children, they're everything to you, and I couldn't let anything happen to them." Zaid studied her carefully. There was no arrogance in her words, no hidden agenda. She was genuine. He had been accustomed to people who had motives, whether driven by ambition or self-interest. Amina was different. Her humility was something rare, something he admired, even if he didn't fully understand it. "I insist," Zaid said, his voice firm yet not forceful. "You may not need anything, but I would like to offer you something, nonetheless. You have done something extraordinary. Your actions tonight have made an indelible mark on my life." Amina shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She glanced at the children, who were still clinging to their father. Zaid followed her gaze, and for a brief moment, they both shared a quiet understanding of what had just transpired. I just want to make sure they're okay," Amina said, her voice softer now. "I never expected anything in return. I'm just a waitress here." She paused, unsure if she had said too much. "It's just my job, and I did what anyone should do in that situation." Zaid smiled, his features softening. "What you did wasn't just a job. You acted from the heart. That's something many people can't say." The words lingered between them, and for the first time that night, Zaid felt a sense of peace. The tension from the earlier chaos was still fresh in his mind, but this moment with Amina gave him a sense of grounding he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know why, but he needed to do something for her. He needed to make sure she knew how much her courage had meant. "I'll tell you what," Zaid said, looking thoughtful. "I'm hosting a charity event next month. I'd like for you to be my guest of honor. I'll ensure you have everything you need. It's the least I can do for what you've done." Amina hesitated, unsure how to respond. The thought of being part of such an event, especially as a guest of honor, seemed so far removed from her reality. She had never imagined she would be invited into the world of billionaires, much less be honored by one. I appreciate the offer, but that's too much," she replied, shaking her head. "I'm just a waitress. You don't owe me anything more than what you've already given. Your children are safe, and that's enough for me." Zaid's expression remained unwavering, his mind set. "You'll come, Amina. It's not just for you, it's for them. It's a chance for you to see how much your act of bravery has meant. And it's also a way for me to truly show my gratitude." Amina looked at him, her thoughts racing. What was the harm in accepting? After all, she had saved his children. There had to be some kind of recognition for that, right? Still, a part of her felt like she didn't belong in that world. "I'll think about it," she said, offering him a small, tentative smile. "Thank you." Zaid nodded, his expression softening further. "I'll have my people reach out to you with the details. No pressure, but know that you'll always have my gratitude." As the evening continued, Amina couldn't help but feel out of place. The luxurious ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the powerful men and women who move with such ease through this world. It was all so different from her humble life. But tonight, she had done something extraordinary. And while the evening was far from over, she felt as if a shift had occurred. For Zaid, this moment of vulnerability had sparked something deep within him. The usual noise of wealth, power, and prestige felt hollow compared to the raw, human connection he had experienced with Amina. She had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. The importance of kindness and courage, not just in the boardroom but in life. He watched her walk away, her head held high despite the nervousness that lingered. Zaid knew that he had to find a way to continue this connection. She had opened a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through, but one that he couldn't ignore any longer. As the night drew to a close, Zaid found himself questioning the choices he had made in life. He had built an empire, but in that fleeting moment of fear and gratitude, he had witnessed something far greater. Amina had saved his children. Yes, but she had also saved him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The days following the gala were filled with a strange sense of restlessness for Zaid. He had spent years building his empire, a world of power, influence, and unimaginable wealth. But now, in the quiet moments after the event, he found himself questioning everything. It wasn't the high-rise towers or the luxurious cars that kept him awake at night. It was the memory of Amina's courage. She had saved his children without a second thought, without asking for anything in return. And for the first time in a long while, Zaid realized there was more to life than money and status. For Amina, the days that followed were equally as unsettling. She had never been one to crave attention or wealth, and yet the offer from Zaid lingered in her mind. It wasn't about the glamorous event or the high-profile guest list. It was the simple fact that she had done something extraordinary. The recognition, the gratitude, and the respect from someone like Zaid were overwhelming. She was just a waitress, after all. What could someone like her possibly have in common with someone like him? Yet, something about the way Zaid had spoken to her, the way he had looked at her with such sincerity, made her question her own place in the world. For the first time, she wondered if she deserved more than the life she had built for herself. But at the same time, she feared that stepping into his world would pull her away from the life she had always known, a life of simplicity and humbleness. Days turned into weeks, and Zaid's determination to follow through with his promise never wavered. He had instructed his team to reach out to Amina, and soon enough, an invitation arrived for her to attend the charity event he was hosting the following month. It was a grand affair, one of the most exclusive events in the city. And yet, despite the luxury and prestige that would surround her, Amina couldn't help but feel a sense of hesitation. On the day of the event, Zaid stood at the center of the ballroom, greeting guests with his usual poise and charisma. He was surrounded by influential figures, CEOs, politicians, and philanthropists, all eager to be in his presence. But his eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, waiting for her arrival. Amina had agreed to come, though she had made it clear that it was out of respect for what he had done for her children, not because she sought recognition. When the doors opened, Zaid's gaze instantly fixed on her. Amina stepped into the grand room, her eyes scanning the vast space, feeling like a fish out of water. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, opting for a simple but elegant dress that accentuated her natural beauty. But as she walked through the sea of well-dressed socialites, she couldn't help but feel the weight of their eyes on her. They were all dressed in fine silks and diamonds, their lives a far cry from her own. Zaid noticed her discomfort immediately. He excused himself from the group he had been speaking with and made his way toward her. Amina hadn't seen him approach, but when she looked up, he was standing there, his warm smile a stark contrast to the cold, indifferent crowd surrounding them. "Amina!" Zaid greeted her warmly, his eyes filled with genuine pleasure. "I'm glad you made it." Amina smiled nervously, feeling the eyes of the room on her. "Thank you for the invitation. I wasn't sure what to expect." Zaid's expression softened as he looked at her. "I know this must feel out of place for you, but I want to make sure you knew how much I appreciate what you did." She looked around, feeling increasingly out of place in the glittering surroundings. "I'm just a waitress, Zaid. This world is not mine." Zaid shook his head, his gaze steady and unwavering. "That's exactly why I wanted you here. You did something that most people in this room couldn't even begin to comprehend. You acted selflessly, without thinking of yourself. That's something that's worth celebrating." His words touched her deeply. Amina had never thought of herself as anything special. She had always considered her job, her role in life, as just that, a job. But standing here, with Zaid by her side, it was hard not to feel a sense of pride. He was seeing her for who she truly was, not just as a waitress or servant to his needs, but as a person with value. As they walked through the crowd, Zaid introduced Amina to several guests, his tone proud as he spoke of her bravery. She felt a mix of discomfort and gratitude as each person greeted her warmly, though they all seemed to view her as an anomaly in this elite world. Zaid, however, remained at her side, offering reassurance with every step. When they reached the center of the ballroom, the atmosphere was electric. The auction was about to begin, and Zaid's charitable contributions were being highlighted for the evening. As the spotlight shifted to him, he turned to Amina with a quiet smile. "Tonight," he said softly, "is not about me. It's about people like you who show us what real courage and kindness look like." Thank you for being here." Amina felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. She had never been the center of attention, much less in a room filled with the city's wealthiest and most powerful people. But there was something about Zaid's words, his presence, that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. As the evening wore on, Zaid and Amina's connection deepened. Despite the differences in their backgrounds, despite the disparity in their wealth and status, they found common ground in the simplest things: shared laughter, a quiet conversation, an unspoken understanding that transcended the world they occupied. But as the night drew to a close, Zaid found himself grappling with an unexpected truth. Amina's presence had brought something into his life that he hadn't realized he was missing: vulnerability. For years, he had built walls around himself, fortresses of power and control, but with her, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. And as the final speech of the evening ended, Zaid found himself standing at the balcony, looking out over the city, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew that this night would mark the beginning of something far more important than any business deal he had ever made. The weeks that followed the charity event were a whirlwind for both Zaid and Amina. What had begun as a simple act of courage had morphed into something far more complex. Zaid couldn't stop thinking about her, the woman who had risked her life to save his children. Her unwavering selflessness, the purity of her actions, had left a mark on him. But beyond that, Amina had a quality that no one in Zaid's world seemed to have: authenticity. Amina, on the other hand, was still processing everything. She had attended the gala at Zaid's invitation, but what she hadn't expected was the way he made her feel. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't invisible. She had always been in the background, whether in the hotel, her small apartment, or her community. But standing next to Zaid, she felt seen. It wasn't just about the praise or the recognition. It was the way he made her feel valued for simply being herself. For Amina, the idea of becoming part of Zaid's world was both thrilling and terrifying. The wealth, the power, the influence, it was all so different from her life. She had worked hard for everything she had, and the thought of stepping into a world where things were handed to you on a silver platter made her uneasy. She didn't want to lose herself in the process. Despite the growing tension in her mind, Amina found herself thinking about Zaid more than she cared to admit. He wasn't just any billionaire. He was different. His kindness, his openness, and his vulnerability had captured something in her that she hadn't realized she was missing. But would it be enough to overcome the barriers that existed between them? Zaid, too, was grappling with emotions he didn't know how to handle. He had always prided himself on being a man who controlled his emotions, his destiny. But Amina's presence in his life had shattered that control. She made him question everything he had built, and more importantly, what he had been missing. There was a part of him that felt deeply connected to her, a bond that transcended wealth and status. But as their relationship evolved, Zaid realized that it was more than just a fleeting attraction. He had never met anyone like her. She wasn't looking for his money, his fame, or his power. She was simply looking for honesty, for a connection. As the days passed, they began to see more of each other. It started with small, casual meetings, coffee at his private office, walks through the quiet streets of Dubai, where they could speak freely without the prying eyes of the public. Their conversations were raw and real, and in those moments, Zaid found himself sharing things he had never shared with anyone before. He talked about his childhood, about the loss of his parents, about the pressures of living up to his family's expectations. In return, Amina opened up about her life, the challenges she faced as a single mother, the sacrifices she had made to ensure her son had a better future. What began as a casual friendship soon began to evolve into something deeper. The barriers between them started to crumble. Zaid no longer saw Amina as just a waitress. She was his equal, someone who had shown him a side of life he had long forgotten. And Amina, despite her initial reservations, began to realize that there was more to Zaid than the wealth and power he embodied. He was a man, just like any other, with hopes, fears, and dreams. One afternoon, Zaid invited Amina to his private villa on the outskirts of Dubai. It was a sprawling estate, the kind of place that could only be described as a sanctuary. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant sound of birds chirping. The villa was filled with elegant decor, but it was the open spaces, the vast gardens, and the panoramic views of the desert that stole the show. It was a place that invited peace, a sharp contrast to the chaotic life they had both known. As they sat by the pool, sipping cold drinks, Zaid turned to Amina with a look of quiet contemplation. "You know, Amina," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Amina raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "What do you mean?" Zaid leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You're different. You don't care about any of this," he said, waving a hand toward the villa, the luxury, the wealth that defined his world. "You don't want anything from me. That's rare." Amina looked at him, her expression serious. "I didn't come into your life for your money, Zaid. I came in because of what you did for my children, and because I saw something in you that I hadn't seen in anyone else." Zaid turned to meet her gaze, his eyes softening. "And what was that?" "Humanity," she said quietly. "I saw humanity in you, Zaid. Not just the businessman or the billionaire. The man." Her words hit him harder than he had anticipated. Zaid had spent so much time building walls around himself, walls of power and protection, that he had almost forgotten what it meant to be human, to be vulnerable, to connect with another person on a deeper level. For the first time, Zaid realized that Amina had done more than save his children. She had saved him, too. She had shown him a world beyond the cold confines of his empire, a world where love, compassion, and connection were more important than anything else. "I don't know how to thank you, Amina," Zaid said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've changed my life." Amina smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I didn't do anything for thanks, Zaid. I did it because I believe in people. I believe in doing the right thing, no matter the cost." For a moment, there was a long silence between them, broken only by the sounds of the wind rustling through the trees. Zaid knew that this was a turning point, a moment of truth. What had begun as a simple act of courage had turned into something much more profound. But there were still challenges ahead. The world they lived in was not kind to relationships like theirs. The power dynamics, the societal pressures, the expectations of their families, all of these things loomed large over them. Zaid had spent his life building an empire, but now he was faced with the prospect of having to tear down everything he knew to build something new. And Amina, despite her growing feelings for him, had her own fears and doubts. She had never imagined a life so far removed from the one she had known, and the fear of losing herself in Zaid's world was still present in the back of her mind. Zaid stood up, offering his hand to Amina. "Come with me," he said. "There's something I want to show you." Without saying a word, Amina took his hand, trusting him completely. As they walked together, side by side, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to this connection they had, something worth fighting for. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the vast desert landscape that stretched out before Zaid's villa. It was a sight he had grown accustomed to, yet every time he looked at the sweeping sands and the endless sky, he was reminded of the unpredictability of life. Everything he had built, all the power, the wealth, the influence, seemed insignificant in the face of the overwhelming emotions that Amina stirred in him. The quiet moments with her were the only ones that made him feel truly alive, and for the first time he began to wonder if it was all worth it, if his empire, his family's expectations, and his carefully crafted persona were worth more than the life he had started to imagine with her. But reality, as always, had a way of intruding. Zaid's phone buzzed on the table next to him, its screen flashing with an incoming message from his father. The tone was stern, the kind of message that meant trouble was brewing. Zaid's father, a man of immense power and influence, had always expected his son to follow the family's legacy, to expand their empire and uphold the values that had been passed down through generations. But Zaid had always felt the weight of those expectations hanging over him, and lately it felt more suffocating than ever. Amina, sensing his tension, looked up from where she was sitting by the pool, her hands clasped in her lap. She could tell something was bothering him, even though Zaid had tried to mask it with a smile. "Zaid," she said softly, "what's wrong?" Zaid let out a long breath, his fingers running through his hair in frustration. He didn't want to worry her, but it was becoming harder and harder to hide the pressure he was under. "It's nothing, Amina. Just family matters." Amina narrowed her eyes, not buying his nonchalant response. She had seen enough of his vulnerability to know when he was hiding something. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice firm. "You can't always carry everything on your own, Zaid. I'm here if you want to talk." Zaid hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It felt like the weight of his father's expectations, combined with his growing feelings for Amina, was pushing him to a breaking point. He didn't want to let her in, didn't want to show her the cracks in his perfect facade, but something inside him told him that she was the one person who might understand. "My father wants you to expand the business," Zaid finally admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of the words. "He wants me to make moves in markets that are risky. He believes I'm the future of the family, but I'm not sure I want that anymore. It's not what I imagined for myself." Amina listened intently, her eyes soft with empathy. She could sense the conflict in him, the pull between duty and desire, between the man he was expected to be and the man he was becoming. "Zaid, you don't have to carry this burden alone. You don't have to do everything just because your father says you should. You have the right to choose your own path." Zaid looked at her, his gaze filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "But it's not that simple. My family's legacy, my whole life has been about living up to their expectations. I don't know how to step away from that, even if I wanted to." Amina stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "I understand that family is important, Zaid, but don't let their dreams become your prison. You have the power to shape your own future. You deserve a life that makes you happy, not just one that satisfies others." For a moment, Zaid allowed himself to breathe, to truly hear her words. The tension that had been building inside him began to loosen, just slightly, as he realized the truth in her statement. But then, as quickly as the relief came, the weight of responsibility settled back on his shoulders. "I wish it were that easy, Amina," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But there are consequences to every decision I make. If I step away from the business, if I let go of my father's vision, everything I've worked for, everything my family has worked for, could collapse. There's no turning back once I make that choice." Amina understood the gravity of his words, but she also knew that Zaid couldn't keep living in the shadow of his family's legacy. "You're not just your family's legacy, Zaid. You're your own person, and you deserve to live a life that reflects who you truly are, not who they want you to be." Zaid stood up, turned to face her fully. There was a fire in his eyes now, a flicker of something deep inside him that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm torn between the life I built and the life I want with you." Amina's heart ached for him. She could see the turmoil in his eyes, the pain of being caught between two worlds. But she also saw something else, a man who was slowly finding the courage to make a choice for himself. "You don't have to make that decision alone," Amina said gently. "Whatever you choose, I'll be here for you. But remember, Zaid, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to live for yourself." Her words hung in the air, and Zaid felt a sense of clarity wash over him. It wasn't going to be easy and it would take time, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to start living for himself, to start choosing the life he wanted, not the one that had been handed to him. Later that evening, after Amina had left for the night, Zaid sat alone on the terrace, staring out at the vast desert that stretched before him. His thoughts were a whirlwind, but one thing had become clear. He couldn't keep living for other people. He had to make a choice, not just for his future, but for the future he wanted with Amina. As the stars began to twinkle above, Zaid made a vow to himself. He would find a way to balance his family's expectations with his own desires. And no matter what happened, he would find the courage to pursue a life that was truly his, a life that included Amina. The days passed quickly, and Zaid found himself lost in his thoughts, torn between the life he had always known and the life he now dreamed of. His father's demands became more pressing, the weight of his family's expectations growing heavier with each passing day. But amidst all the noise, one thought persisted in his mind. Amina. She had been the anchor that kept him grounded when everything else in his life seemed to be falling apart. She was the one person who had shown him what it truly meant to live, not just for success or power, but for love, connection, and authenticity. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, hiding behind his wealth and influence. But Amina had shattered those walls, revealing the man he had buried deep inside. One evening, as the sun began to set and the city lights started to flicker on, Zaid found himself standing on the balcony of his villa, staring out at the sprawling city below. The view was breathtaking, the skyline lit up with the glow of thousands of lights. Yet, despite the beauty of it all, Zaid felt an emptiness inside him. He had everything a man could want: power, wealth, influence. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. Not when he thought about the life he could have with Amina. Zaid had known for some time that the choice he was about to make would change everything. But now, as he stood there, looking out over the city, he realized that the decision was no longer just about him. It was about Amina, about the future they could build together, and the sacrifices they would both have to make. A knock on the door broke his reverie, and he turned to find his assistant standing in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Mr. Al-Hakim, your father is here," she said, her voice soft. "He insists on speaking with you immediately." Zaid's heart sank. He had known this moment would come. His father, ever the demanding figure in his life, had always made it clear that Zaid's future was to follow the family's legacy. But Zaid knew that if he went down this path, he would lose everything he had come to care about. "Send him in," Zaid said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. His father entered the room with the same air of authority that he always carried. The man was tall, with sharp features and an intimidating presence. He wore the finest suit money could buy, his every move calculated and precise. But despite the wealth and power that surrounded him, Zaid could see the weariness in his father's eyes, a weariness that came from years of carrying the weight of their family's empire. "Zaid," his father began, his voice cold and commanding, "I've been hearing troubling things. You've been avoiding my calls, avoiding your responsibilities. This business deal is crucial to our future, and I need you to step up. This is your legacy, your duty." Zaid's jaw tightened as he fought to keep his emotions in check. His father's words were familiar, but they no longer held the same weight they once did. The business, the legacy, none of it mattered anymore. "I'm not doing it, Father," Zaid said, his voice calm but firm. "I can't keep living for you, for the family's legacy. I've spent my entire life trying to meet your expectations, but I've realized something. I need to live for myself now." His father's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "What are you talking about? You're a fool if you think you can just abandon everything we've worked for. You have no idea what it takes to keep this empire running. You've had everything handed to you, Zaid. But the real world isn't a fairy tale." Zaid took a deep breath, trying to keep his anger in check. "Maybe I don't want to live in your world anymore. Maybe I want something different, something real." His father scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're going to throw away everything we've built? You're going to choose a woman, a waitress, over your own family, over your own future?" The words hit Zaid like a punch to the gut. His father's disdain for Amina was clear, but Zaid refused to let that sway him. "Amina is the reason I'm standing here right now. She's the one who showed me what it means to live with integrity, with love. She's the one who made me realize that there's more to life than power and wealth." His father's face reddened with rage. "You are not a child anymore, Zaid. You don't get to make these kinds of decisions. This is not just about you. This is about our family, our name. And if you think I'll stand by while you ruin everything we've worked for, you're wrong." Zaid's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "Maybe I'm not the one ruining things. Maybe it's this life, this empire that's broken. Maybe it's time for me to choose something different." The silence that followed was deafening. Zaid could feel the tension in the room, the weight of his father's disappointment crushing him. But he didn't back down. He couldn't. His father looked at him one last time, his gaze cold and calculating. "I will not forgive you for this," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're on your own now. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost." With those final words, Zaid's father turned and left the room, leaving Zaid standing alone in the silence. Zaid felt a sense of finality wash over him. His decision had been made. There was no turning back now. He had chosen Amina, chosen the life he wanted, and no matter the consequences, he was willing to face them. Later that night, as he sat alone in his study, Zaid received a call. It was from Amina. He hadn't spoken to her since the gala, as the tension with his father had consumed all his energy. But now, with the weight of his decision lifting from his shoulders, he knew it was time to speak with her. Zaid, Amina's voice came through the phone, soft and tentative. "How are you?" He closed his eyes, letting the sound of her voice wash over him. "I'm better now," he said quietly. "I've made my decision. Amina, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then Amina's voice, filled with emotion, broke through. "Zaid, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I've made up my mind. I want a life with you. No matter what happens, I'm not going back." Amina's voice shook with emotion. "Are you sure? This is everything. Zaid, you're giving up everything for me." Zaid smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace he had never felt before. "Yes, I'm sure, because this is what I want. This is what I've been searching for. And I'm ready to start a new life with you." The days following Zaid's decision were filled with a mix of relief and uncertainty. He had made a choice that would change everything, a choice to step away from the life he had always known and embrace a future built on love, vulnerability, and authenticity. For so long, Zaid had been defined by the expectations of his family and the weight of their legacy. But now, as he walked alongside Amina, he knew that his future was in his hands, not his father's. But the world wasn't going to make it easy for him. Zaid knew that the moment he turned his back on his father's empire, he would be viewed as a disappointment, as someone who had thrown away everything that had been carefully built for him. The pressure from his family, the whispers behind his back, and the judgment of the people who had once admired him, all of it loomed large over him. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was Amina. Zaid had learned the hard way that love, trust, and connection were far more valuable than any amount of wealth or power. And as he stood at the edge of the world he had once known, ready to embrace the unknown with Amina by his side, he realized that this was where he was meant to be. The final confrontation with his father had been brutal, and though it had shaken him to his core, Zaid had found his resolve. He couldn't go back. Not to the life that was waiting for him. Not to the expectations that were weighing him down. His heart had chosen Amina, and with her, he saw a future that was full of possibility, a future that didn't rely on power or money, but on something far more meaningful. Amina had always been the catalyst for this transformation. She had opened his eyes to the life he had been missing, a life where love, compassion, and connection were the cornerstones. When he thought about her, about how she had been there for him and his children without hesitation, he knew that she was the key to his happiness. She was the one who had shown him that there was more to life than what he had been chasing for so long. The day finally arrived when Zaid made his decision public. He stood before a small gathering of close friends, business associates, and family members. His father was not present, as expected, and the absence of his stern presence made Zaid feel a sense of relief. Today was about Zaid, the man he had become, the man he wanted to be, and he was ready to share that with the world. "Thank you all for coming today," Zaid began, his voice steady, though there was a hint of emotion in it. "I've spent a long time trying to live up to expectations that were never truly my own. I've made choices based on what others wanted for me, not what I wanted for myself. But today, I am here to tell you all that I am no longer the man you think I am. I am not defined by my wealth, my family's legacy, or the empire that was built for me." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The room was silent, the people in attendance unsure of where this was going. But Zaid wasn't afraid anymore. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to back down. "I have chosen a different path, a path that leads me to something far more meaningful than anything I have ever known. I have chosen love, I have chosen authenticity, and I have chosen the woman who has shown me what it truly means to live." The room was still. Some faces looked at him in disbelief, others in confusion. But Zaid stood tall, resolute in his decision. "I am stepping away from the business, from the legacy that was never mine to carry. I am starting anew with Amina by my side. We will build a future together, one where we define our own success, our own happiness. I may not know what that future holds, but for the first time in my life, I am excited to find out. Amina, standing beside him, smiled softly, her eyes filled with pride. She had known the weight of Zaid's decision, the risks he was taking, but she also knew that this was the beginning of something beautiful. They had come a long way from that night at the gala, and now they were ready to face whatever came next together. Zaid's announcement sent shockwaves through the room, and the reactions were mixed. Some people were outraged, others were confused, but Zaid didn't care. He had made his decision, and that was all that mattered. The world could judge him, question his choices, but Zaid knew deep down that he was finally free. As the gathering came to a close, Zaid and Amina stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a mix of congratulations and silent disapproval. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was that they were together, and they were free to live their lives on their own terms. As the evening drew to a close, Zaid took Amina's hand, leading her outside to the quiet garden that overlooked the city. The night air was cool, and the stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds. It was a moment of peace in a world that had been anything but peaceful for the past few weeks. "Amina," Zaid said, his voice soft and full of emotion. "Thank you. Thank you for showing me that it's okay to let go, to choose what's truly important." Amina smiled, her heart full. "You don't need to thank me, Zaid. You've always had the power to make this decision. You just needed to believe in yourself." Zaid nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I believe in us, Amina, and that's all that matters." They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, feeling the weight of the decision settle into their bones. This was the beginning of something new, something real. The road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but Zaid knew one thing for sure. He had Amina by his side, and with her, he could face anything. Together, they walked into the future, hand in hand, ready to build a life that was uniquely their own.